So let's move on to the all posts page, which lists, guess what, all the posts. Hence, in my templates blog folder, I'll add a new HTML file, a new template we're going to add, and that could be the posts HTML file or all posts HTML. I guess I'll go with all posts, since that describes really well what this template will be about. Now, of course, I want to base that on my base template, so I'll extend that base HTML file just as we did it in index.html. And then I will also want to set my title, add some CSS files, and add some content. Hence, I'll copy those instructions, those tags from index.html into all posts HTML, and just make sure that I also end this block down there. Now, of course, we'll also include a different CSS file here soon, but let's get there step by step. The title here could be all my posts, something like this. And of course, the content now is totally different than what we had in index.html. At least partially, because I still want this navigation. And since I still want that navigation, it sounds like a good idea to also share this navigation logic and not duplicate and copy it all the time. Now, in the last course section, I used an include for that. So I included an HTML snippet. And that would be a valid way of doing it. But here, since I will never ever change that header, since it will really always be exactly the same, I will instead cut it from index.html and not put it into a to be included HTML file, but instead I'll add it to base HTML above my content. Now, this is really just an alternative to an include, which I want to use here since I really don't ever need to pass in any specific data or anything like that. And then it's less code than including. We'll still see include in action in a couple of minutes though. But here I'll place the header in the base HTML file, and therefore I don't need to add that header code to all posts or index.html. Now, in all posts HTML, I now instead want to add a section, opening and closing of course, with an ID of all-posts. And the idea of that section is really just that it has a title, a h2 tag, where I say my collected posts, and then below that an unordered list, which lists all those posts in a grid. And for that unordered list will again have a list item, and then I want to have an article in there which holds my post preview. And that's the same as on index.html. There we also have a list item with a post preview. And that's important. These are really just post previews. They contain the image, the title, and a little excerpt. This is not the complete post. Instead, the idea is that you later click on those posts. That's why we have the anchor tag here. And you're then taken to that post detail page, which contains the complete post. So therefore here, I actually just want to have a post preview on both the starting page, which lists the latest free posts, and the all posts page, which lists all posts, but just their previews. So since I want to have the exact same markup, a list item with an article in there and so on, this now is a great place for an include. Hence, I'll add a new subfolder here, includes, and in there I'll add my post HTML file. And then I'll grab this list item here with my article and so on, and cut it from index.html, and instead add it here in post HTML. And then in index.html, in the place where we had this post a second ago, we can now use the include tag and include blog includes post HTML, and do the same in all posts HTML, where I also, instead of rewriting that list item and that article, just include that post. Now, you might wonder how we will then deal with posts with different data, because of course not all posts will be about mountain hiking, but I did show you in the last course section that you can pass data into an include. So that's what we'll then utilize later. For the moment, if we save this and reload, we get an error on the starting page because in the include I'm using the static tag, and in the include we're not enabling that. So here we should also load static. But once we do that, once we adjust this post include, if I now reload, it's still there, but it will then also work on the all posts page, as you will see in a second. So therefore now here we're basically done. I will just include this post, let's say 6 times here, so that we have a couple of posts to preview. They will all have the same data for now, but we'll change that soon. But now to see that all posts page, we of course also want to make sure we can reach it through our views. And therefore in the views py, here for the posts function, I want to return render and pass in the request, and then render blog all posts HTML like this. Now if we save this and we manually enter slash posts here, and we're getting an error here, the static error, of course, because I'm using the static keyword here, I should of course also load static. I'm using it here, so we should load static. And with that, we see all posts. Now the styling is off, and therefore again, I have a little file for you which provides some styling, and you find that attached, the all-posts CSS file. And I will also add that to my static blog folder next to index.css. I'll add the all posts CSS file, and then attached you find my finished all posts CSS file, and you can either just copy in the content or overwrite your all posts CSS file with mine. Now we need to make sure that this file gets included, and therefore in all posts HTML, instead of loading blog index CSS, I want to load blog all-posts CSS. With that, if I reload here, that looks a bit nicer, but there are some broken styles here. And the reason for this simply is that a couple of styles for the single posts or also related to the navigation were part of the index CSS file before. I had them in there before because previously when I provided that file, we only had the index HTML file. Now those styles shouldn't be part of that file anymore. Instead, they should be made available to all templates, and therefore it makes sense to go to index.css in the static blog folder and select all those styles that include the main navigation, so that start with #main navigation. Select all those styles and cut them and add them to the app CSS file instead, here, because that app CSS file is included in the base template and therefore always present. And for the individual post, which you find at the bottom of index CSS, there you find a bunch of .post classes below about p. Those post classes, those post class selectors, you should select all of them and cut them. And then, since this all refers to the post HTML file in the end, we might want to add a new CSS file, which we name post CSS. You could also add an includes folder and add the CSS file there to make it clear that it belongs to an include. I will not do that here though. I will just add post CSS, add those classes in there, and then of course make sure that this gets imported. And therefore now I want to add an import to that, and I only want to add that import in the templates where we have those post previews. So index.html and all posts. I don't want to add an import to post CSS in my base HTML file, because this will be the base for all kinds of templates, and not all templates will have post previews. Therefore, I instead go to index.html, and there, in the CSS files block, I now also will add another link, add it first here, before we have the index CSS import, add this link here, and there construct a static URL to blog post CSS like this. And then, of course, copy that link and also add it to all posts HTML in front of that all posts CSS import. Now, with those changes made, if we reload, this looks much nicer, and we have that finished all posts page now.